What is a hero? Is it someone who triumphs, someone who survives, or simply someone who dares to dream, even when everything collapses? Today, I'm going to tell you about a man who gave everything, but who never knew glory in his lifetime. A man who, despite failures and betrayals, always chose to believe in hope, even at the cost of his soul. Let me tell you the story of a broken dreamer, a peerless warrior, and a teacher whose teachings still resonate today. Let me tell you about Jiraiya. From a very young age, Jiraiya was marked by loneliness and doubt. Born into a world where war consumed hearts and destroyed bonds, he had to fight to find his place. But unlike so many others, he never let darkness consume his soul. On the contrary, he chose to be a light, a flickering light, perhaps, but a light nonetheless. Jiraiya knew the pain of failing to protect those he loved. He saw his dreams of peace shatter against the harsh reality of the ninja world. Yet, he continued forward, carrying the weight of his failures and the burden of his hopes on his shoulders. Teacher, warrior, poet, Jiraiya was all of these, but above all, he was a man who still believed that love and understanding could change the world. His life wasn't a succession of shining victories. It was a path paved with mistakes, losses, and lessons. And yet, it was through his failures that he found the strength to pass on to his students what he held most precious: his faith in a better future. Today, his legacy lives on through those who loved him, those who listened to him, and even through those he fought. Until his last breath, Jiraiya fought not for himself but for a world that never knew how to love him as he deserved. So today, let's look back at the story of this man. Let's understand his choices, his dreams, his sacrifices, and honor the one called the Legendary Sannin. Prepare to discover the life and death of Jiraiya, a story filled with melancholy, courage, and infinite wisdom. Jiraiya, like many children of his time, did not have the luxury of living a protected childhood. In the village of Konoha, where the legend is born, his child's heart was already heavy with the weight of expectations, loneliness, and emptiness. He was just a young boy, but wars, battles, and struggles for survival became part of his daily life much earlier than he would have wished. When he lost friends, when he saw death strike around him, he understood that life was nothing more than a succession of moments in which one had to fight to breathe a little longer. It was in this context of suffering and violence that he met Hiruzen Sarutobi. Their meeting was not the encounter of two naive children, but that of two souls who, despite their differences, sought something greater. Hiruzen, the one who would later become the legendary Hokage, was not just a mentor to Jiraiya, he was his brother of the soul. Together, they shared more than dreams of the future. They shared the pain of a world that crushed them, but they also sought to find meaning in it, to give it meaning. But his greatest burden was not the physical pain nor the many battles he fought. No, the heaviest burden for Jiraiya was disappointment, the betrayal of those he believed in. The shadow of his former comrade, Orochimaru, always haunted his dreams, the one he had considered a brother. Orochimaru's defection, the transformation of his friend into an enemy, was a devastating ordeal. Jiraiya wanted to believe that people could change, that there was always a chance, a hope. But in Orochimaru's case, he learned the hard way that sometimes, even love and understanding cannot overcome the darkness in a soul. And then there was Naruto, this young boy so similar to him in his pain, in his search for recognition and meaning. Jiraiya took him under his wing, passing on the lessons he himself had learned throughout his life. But at every step, he felt that terrible fear. What if he, too, failed, as he had failed with Orochimaru? What if the cruel fate of his own past repeated itself through Naruto? It was an invisible burden, that of a master who knows his student might fall into the same traps, the same darkness. In the battle against pain, Jiraiya finally saw the extent of the tragedy. There, in one last fight, he had to face a former disciple, the one he had raised, Nagato. But this was no longer the young man he had known. No, he had become a monster, a fallen god obsessed with pain and vengeance. And in that fight, Jiraiya understood that sometimes suffering cannot be healed, that some wounds are too deep to close. Even a man as wise as he had to admit that he did not have all the answers. He had lived in hope, but deep down, he knew hope would never be enough to erase the darkness. When Jiraiya ventured into aim, the hidden rain village, he knew he was risking his life. His steps were heavy, as though he carried on his shoulders the weight of all the lost souls he had failed to save. But Jiraiya had to know the truth. Who was Pain? Why did this boy, his student, now bear the name of suffering? Nagato, Yahiko, Konan. 3 children he had saved during the war, 3 pure souls he had trained and loved like a father. But war is unforgiving, and where he had seen hope sprout, suffering had burned everything away. Pain was no longer Nagato. He had become a god broken by the world, convinced that peace could only be achieved through pain. The battle began. In this village of ceaseless rain, where the tears of the sky never stopped, Jiraiya faced his own failure. He faced the 6 bodies of Pain, each bearing a face of hatred, despair, and judgment. Each blow struck by Pain was like a reminder. It is you, Master, who let me become what I am. Yet Jiraiya fought with all his heart. He summoned Fukasaku and Shima, his lifelong allies, to reach the power of Sage Mode. His courage was intact, his will unshakable. But in his mind, doubts gnawed at him. Why had he failed? Why hadn't his words been enough? Was he also to blame for this pain? Pain was relentless. He wielded the powers of the 6 paths, fighting like an enraged god, while Jiraiya, though a legendary ninja, was gradually worn down. Each blow he endured brought him closer to his end, but he never gave up. Because Jiraiya wasn't just a fighter, he was a dreamer, a man who still believed, deep inside, that he could bring Nagato back to the light. But the truth is cruel. Pain was no longer Nagato. His eyes, the Rinnegan, were no longer those of a child he had saved, but those of a god who sought to punish all of humanity. When the final blow fell, when Pain pierced Jiraiya's heart, the latter knew his end was near. His body collapsed into the dark waters of Aim. The rain continued to fall, as if the sky were mourning the death of a man who had always wanted to bring light. Yet even in that moment, Jiraiya didn't lose hope. He carved a final message onto Fukasaku's back, a key for his students to one day defeat Pain, because that was who Jiraiya was. Even in defeat, he thought of others. Even in death, he believed in the future. Jiraiya died on the battlefield, alone, but not without leaving behind a message. A message for Naruto, for the generation to come. He saw in him the hope of a better world, even though he knew that world would never be perfect. But that was his true strength. He never stopped believing that, despite the suffering and pain, peace was possible. He wasn't a man without flaws. He wasn't a perfect man. But he chose to live by his principles, even if it meant sacrificing his life so others could have a chance. His fate was tragic, but in that tragedy, there were lessons that will echo through time. Jiraiya, this man who had seen pain, betrayal, and loss, lived by staying true to an ideal, a world without war. He failed, yes, but he never stopped fighting. He was a broken man, a weary man, but a man who never stopped dreaming. And in this world that sometimes seems too dark, Jiraiya remains a legend, not for his physical strength, but for his ability to dream of a better world, even when he could no longer see it with his own eyes. Because in the end, it's not the conclusion that matters. What matters is the path we carve. So when we talk about Jiraiya, we're not just talking about a legendary ninja. We're talking about a man who, despite everything he experienced, never gave up on his dream of peace. And perhaps, just perhaps, that dream will one day come true. Sensei Jiraiya, you were so much more than a legendary ninja. You were a man with an immense heart, always ready to give everything for others. Your absence weighs on me every day. You taught me to dream, to believe in a better world, even when everything seemed lost. But without you, everything feels so much harder. I will keep fighting for you, for your dream. You are my hero, and I will never forget you. Naruto.